Thank you. All right. Welcome everyone to the GFAR webinar on basic search engine optimization, a topic, as many topics as we have tackled in the previous webinars, which is very close to my heart, which very often sounds much more complex than it really is. First, a word from our sponsor, of course. This webinar is organized by GFAR, the Global Forum on Agriculture Research. During this webinar, the man behind the scene is Charles Plummer, who will manage the slides and the chat Q&A. He will also be the policeman who will mute your video and your audio. So there is Charles. So there is no reason for anybody except Charles and me to be on video. My name is Peter Cazier. I will be guiding you through the content. Charles and I both work for the GFAR Secretariat, and we manage their social media and online media channels and projects. A small word on the logistics of this webinar. For this webinar, we're all connected through BlueJeans, a webinar service, which allows everyone to see the presentations and the speakers. Feedback, tips, and questions should only be done via the chat box. It's a little chat icon on the top right-hand side of your screen. We do this and keep your video and audio muted because otherwise it will suck up a lot of bandwidth from everybody, and we'll be hearing everybody's background noise in their offices, which is really disturbing. But even though we are with a big group, still I would like this webinar to be as interactive as possible. So I do encourage you to send us remarks, suggestions, and questions during the presentation itself using the chat box. During the webinar, we will stop at regular intervals to check for your chat input. So whenever you have a question or a suggestion that pops up in your mind, just type it right in the chat box, and we'll go over the stack of incoming questions and remarks during the regular Q&A breaks. In this webinar, I split it up in different chapters, so we'll do a Q&A break after every chapter. After this webinar, I will also send you a mail with a link to the recording of the webinar and some links to websites or resources that I mentioned during the webinar, or possibly also some answers to questions I couldn't answer during the webinar itself. We run for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on the amount of questions that you have. I'll mute my video now and see if Charles is ready to start the presentation.
Just one moment.
Sure. Very good. Thanks, Charles.
Okay.
Yeah, that looks perfect. Thank you. Next slide. The structure of the webinar. I've split it off in 5 different chapters. First, I want to take a step back before we talk about search traffic and search engine optimization. I want to illustrate a bit why search traffic is really important for our website. Then we're going to go closer to our goal. We're going to check how to check for search traffic and the statistics that we get from search traffic. And then to understand how to do search engine optimization, we need to understand how Google ranks, finds, and interprets content on your website. Based on that, knowing how Google interprets our content, then we can look at how to get better search results. How do we tweak our website, our pages, or our blogs to get better search results? And then the last short chapter is about what I would call the art of web mastering. When we have all of this search result, what can we do to convert those incidental search visitors into returning visitors? We go to the next slide, Charles. So if we look at why search traffic is so important, be it for our website or for our blogs or online repositories? Well, it's very simple. It is the most important single source of traffic on your website. And that's something that people don't really realize. If you go to the next slide, Charles. If we look at an example from our environment, this is a typical website from a typical nonprofit agriculture organization, a research organization. The site has about 1 million page views per year, and they do a pretty good social media and email marketing. The organization is pretty well known, and they have a good navigation. So if you look at their traffic from over a year, what do we see? In all of the traffic of all of the incoming visitors that we receive on this website, 59% comes from search engines. These are people who search for some content, found a link in the search engine with our website and clicked on that. That is the incoming search traffic. So the organic search typically would be between let's say 40 and 60% of all of our traffic. Now, if we look at a little bit of details, next slide, Charles, in figures, we see that in those traffic patterns, and if we look at specifically at the difference between the search traffic and the amount of traffic that the social media channels, for instance, generate, then we see for this website a typical pattern. The search traffic is about 10 to 20 times higher than the traffic you get from social media. And remember, this example is from a website where you do a pretty good social media outreach. So then for yourself, you should really compare the time and the efforts you spend on managing your social media channels, your Twitter and your Facebook and your LinkedIn, etc., compared to the time that you spend on tailoring and optimizing your search traffic. Purely on traffic figures, we should spend 10 to 20 times more efforts on search traffic than what we spend on managing our social media channels, simply because the traffic that we get from search is 10 to 20 times higher. Now, I do not know any organization that does this. Most of the time, hardly anyone spends any time on the tailoring and even the monitoring of search traffic. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's because it's not clear how important this search traffic is in terms of your total volume, but also very often it falls in between the cracks of responsibilities between webmasters, the technical people, and the content generators, mainly the communication staff. Next slide, Charles. But there is more. It's not just the volume of search traffic, which is important. So search traffic is not only the highest in volume of any traffic from a single source on your website, but it's also the highest in quality. And there's a big difference between volume and quality in search traffic or in general web traffic. Typically, as we see here, the search traffic has one of the lowest bounce rates from all incoming traffic. The bounce rate is the percentage of people who come onto a single page in your site and only read that single page. They don't click on a second page or a third page. They basically bounce off. So in a way, in a future webinar, we'll look at how to track the website statistics, but the bounce rate is one of the most important figures when you analyze your web traffic and your traffic quality. Next slide, Charles. Let's look at those bounce rate figures a little bit more into detail for this particular website. So knowing that for bounce rates, the lower this figure, the better it is. Then you can see search traffic is the second most valuable type of incoming traffic on your site. About half the visitors that come onto your site via a search engine also look for other content on your site and click on at least one other page. Also interesting is look at the difference of the bounce rates between, for instance, social media and search traffic. When people click on a link you publish on your Twitter, on your Facebook, on your LinkedIn account, only 33% reads another piece of content. They come onto one single page that they have found on your Twitter and your Facebook, and that's where it ends for at least 67%. Only 33% clicks on another page. So the quality of the traffic that we get via the search engines is very high. It is very precious traffic, and we'll come back onto that topic later. So two things to remember. in this chapter why search traffic is important. It's important as a volume, as a source of traffic to your site, often 10 to 20 times more important than your social media channels, and it's very high quality traffic. People are typically interested in reading more than just a page they have landed on coming in from the search engine. This is the end of the first chapter. Let's see if, although it's early on, if we have any questions coming in already, Charles?
No questions yet, no.
Very good. We're early on. So don't forget, guys, this webinar and the usefulness of this webinar comes on your questions and remarks and tips. So please keep them coming. Next slide, Charles. So we looked at why search traffic is important. Now, how do we check for search traffic? Next slide, Charles. We're going fast here. So how well is your site doing in the search? Well, there's two ways to look at it. It is retroactively. It is looking at the statistics. For instance, Google Analytics or built-in statistics. And then we're going to look at the actual search. When we search for things relevant to our website and we mimic a standard web user, how does our site behave and what can people find? Next slide. So in the statistics, we already looked at it in the previous chapter. In Google Analytics, as we discussed, how much traffic do you get? I can tell you, if you get less than 40 or 50% of search traffic compared to the total traffic you have on your website, then there is something wrong with your site. You should not have less than 40 or 50%. So that's where the search engine optimization comes in place. Also check for the bounce rate. Search traffic should be one of the least bounced traffic sources. If this is not the case, then typically there is something wrong with your navigation or the teasers that incites people to read more pages. And we'll come back to that later. Next slide, Charles. Now, Google Analytics is the main traffic analysis tool that we use, that most of the people use. But I know that many of you, for instance, use WordPress.com or other externally hosted versions of blogs, for instance, Blogger or Tumblr. And WordPress.com does not allow you to integrate Google Analytics into your site. So, but even here, like in WordPress.com, we can find some basic statistics which are built into WordPress.com. This is a screenshot from statistics actually coming from the GFAR blog, which runs on WordPress.com. Here again, you see, if you look at these figures, that even for our blog, our search traffic is 4 or 5 times higher than the social media traffic. And again, this is for our blog, which we heavily market on the social media channels. So a final note on this, as we mentioned in the previous webinars, keep track of your statistics, but not only as an absolute number, as one figure. More importantly, for these statistics, be it for the search traffic or other statistics figures, keep track of the trend. So see if the traffic is going up, if your search traffic is going up, if your bounce rates keep on going down. This means that you're in the right, that you're actually doing stuff which helps your site.
Peter,
next slide.
excuse me.
Yes.
We have a couple questions and a remark.
I'll
save
switch
it for
to
later.
Q&A, Charles.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll stop at the Q&A right after this this chapter.
Okay.
All right. Now, that was just traffic. That is more retroactively, is monitoring what's going on with our search traffic. How many visitors do we get? What is the bounce rate? What is the quality of our search traffic? Now, of course, we need to be proactive. So how do we check how our site behaves in a search engine? So what we do is, well, we try to mimic a search, just like an ordinary visitor, a web searcher would do. So for instance, if we would do a search for nonprofit agriculture research, this is on the screen what we get. And yay, CGR features as a third most prominent place. So if I would be the webmaster of CGR.org, for me, that would be an excellent result, because the search that I do, nonprofit agriculture research, is really key for my site. Meanwhile, Aston, if you keep on muting your video and your audio, please, otherwise we're going to consume too much bandwidth. Thanks. Now, let's do a search. Next slide, Charles. Let's do a search on, for instance, agriculture research in arid areas. If I'm Icarda, this would be one of my main keywords, agriculture research in arid areas. And here again, I can see Icarda is featured on the 4th place of the first page, which is a pretty good result. For me, as long as you end up on the 1st or 2nd page in the search results, you're doing well. If you're hidden in the 3rd page and beyond, you need to do better. Statistics show that if you're featured lower in the 3rd, 4th page, and so on, you get far, far less search traffic. So in search engine optimization, one of our goals is to be featured high up when people look for keywords which are relevant to our work. But I challenge you to do this exercise for your main projects, not just for general for your site. Agriculture research in arid areas is fine to try to see how Icarda is featuring, but try to find projects and by entering content keywords, not by project name or the name of the project scientist, but do it by content. See how you are featured in, for instance, trying to find research on pearl millet in Africa, or climate smart villages in Zambia, or, for instance, world rice production statistics, anything that relates to specific projects and are topics that people would probably search, and you want to lure them into your site. Now, it is often, and you can do this quite detailed, it is often, easy to get baffled how often your websites do not get featured prominently the moment we go deeper than the general keywords which are typical for our websites. So do keep in mind, though, when you try to mimic an average searcher, a Google user, is that Google searches are customized. So if you want to test this and you want to try to mimic an average web visitor, how do people find my web traffic? And let me try to mimic that typical web searcher. Make sure you're not signed into Google. So log out of Google, because Google presents search results for you based on your previous searches and clicks. But even if you're not signed in, Google can look in your past browsing history using the cookies that websites drop into your browser. And these might be quite extensive. Google also shows results based on your geographic location and language. We once actually did a test by having several people at the same time. We were all online on Skype, and everybody Googled the same keywords and compared the search results one to another. And it was interesting to see how the search results differed for the different parts of the world. Also, when you use the Chrome browser, make sure you're not signed into your Chrome browser, because again, Google searches will be customized based on your Chrome browser history. Also, do keep in mind that Google often mixes search results with advertising, and they're often criticized for that. They're often pushing sites who pay for ads higher in the search results. But still, we can get a pretty good view of how people find our content by typing in keywords, typing in things that typically people would look for when they try to find our projects or where they should end up on our website. Next slide, Charles. Now, this is for a general web search. Now, we can do the same also for images, for an image search. If I do millets in Africa, this is the results that I get. And very often already here, this is where people start to hampering, where websites start to show how inefficient they are. It's very rare that on websites, people curate their images to make it easy searchable. So in here, millets in Africa, we saw the search result, and I think it was for Ikrisat, who has projects with millets in Africa. They were featured quite high up. Here on the search results, we can see that they already start to be featured further down. Next slide, Charles. You can also do this search for videos. Now, as you will see for videos, though, most of the top listed videos will be from YouTube. Why? Well, it's simple. YouTube is owned by Google, and they often prefer their own content. But at this point, let me point out the snippet information. If you look at search results, you see a title, you see the URL, and you see a short description or narrative. Now, this is what we call snippet information. This is the most relevant information that Google could find for your search item. And it's true. If you do a web search or an image search or a video search, that snippet information is what Google found as the most relevant related to the search qualifiers, the search items. So for videos, for instance, as we have in this example, it's pretty easy. And thus it's also easy for you to manipulate. It's very easy to see where Google finds its relevant information. For YouTube, it simply takes the title and the description of the video as you have entered it in YouTube. That's why for the people who participated in a previous webinar, when we stress the importance of tweaking your YouTube videos, your titles and your descriptions, unless if you put a significant title to your YouTube video and put a couple of paragraphs of descriptors which describe what is in the video with the relevant keywords, people will never find your video. If your video is called 1234.mp4 and you leave the description blank, people will never ever find your video. Now, if you look at that snippet of information and how Google finds your content for images, it is slightly more complex and time consuming. And we'll come back to that in a moment. But when you do a full web search for pages, actual content pages, that information in a snippet is really significant to figure out what Google has crawled and picked up as the most relevant information for its search. Now, in the art of search engine optimization, it really comes down to tweak or tailor our content in such a way that we make it easier for Google to find the relevant information. So search engine optimization is nothing else in tweaking our content and the mechanics that Google is using to discover our content so that Google finds our content easier based on keywords, based on relevant information. Now, to be able to tailor that content, we need to understand how Google finds, interprets, and ranks content. That's for the next chapter. So, Charles, on to the next slide, the Q&A. I think you had some questions for me.
Okay, yeah. So we had Daisy asking if you could please repeat what you said about 40% as a way of checking the health of your search engine optimization.
Okay, very good. I tackle that first. Daisy, when you go and look at your Google Analytics and you look at the overall traffic patterns, you will see the big families of the origins of traffic. You will see the direct traffic, which are people who typed in a direct URL. They typed in agroforestry.org. They typed in cgr.org. This is direct traffic, or the direct traffic going to a particular blog post. You have referral traffic, which is traffic that comes in onto your website when people click on a link on a third-party site. You have your social media traffic. You have traffic was generated by email. The organic search part in there should be minimum 40 to 50% of your overall traffic. If it is less, then this means there is something wrong with your search engine optimization. Any website or any blog should at least have, from the total website traffic, from a total visitor traffic, should at least have 40 to 50% of organic search. Next.
Thank you.
Welcome, Daisy. Charles?
Okay, the next question we have is from David. He says about the search engine stats, does it factor in bots in the search results?
No, that's a good question. See, David is a webmaster. No, this is live human traffic. Bots and robots that scan and crawl the website are not included. Simply because the Google Analytics is a script and bots don't execute scripts. So this is live traffic from live visitors. This is bots excluded. We cannot see bot traffic or robot or automated traffic in our Google Analytics, neither on the WordPress.com statistics. Next.
All right. Would my IP address influence my Google search results?
Yes. Through your IP address, Google knows where you are geographically. It will also know the language of that region. So Google will tailor. these are not major differences. For instance, you will not have a website like cgr.org featuring on the first 3 top search results in South America, and it would be on the last 4 pages of the search results in Asia, for instance. But there are variations. And it's not often that we can see websites migrating from the first to the second page, for instance. So yes, it is based on your IP address from which Google knows where you are located and automatically knows what would be the main languages which are spoken at that geographic location. So it will be based on your IP address. That's correct. Next, Charles.
Okay, and the last one I have for right now, Epiphany says, I'm not a savvy web developer. Can I add Google Analytics to my blog and website myself? Any tips?
Yes, you can. Some of the content management systems make it very easy. So they have somewhere a feature where you just put in your Google Analytics code. To explain you very shortly, step by step. So Google Analytics as a tool from Google, you need to sign in with your Google login. You need to tell Google which the websites are that you want to monitor. For that, you need to be the webmaster. So you need to have physical access to the website. At the next step, Google verifies whether you're actually the webmaster. So they will give you a little bit of code which you need to put onto your website or your blog. And then it verifies whether you have put the snippet in there. So the link is made between Google Analytics and your website. So it is not really difficult to do. I do understand if you would be a general content generator, let's say press officer, it might be a little bit more difficult. But in there, I would suggest that somewhere you get help from your webmasters. They will do it in 1 to 3. It really takes nothing more than 2 minutes to enter the Google Analytics statistics in a website or a blog. Do remember, though, that some of the tools that we use to publish, we call them content management systems, do not allow you to put Google Analytics in. They're very limited. And these are typically those that we do not host ourselves. WordPress.com, not WordPress.org, WordPress.com or Blogger or Tumblr. Where it's a little bit more difficult to do. But even those would have built-in statistics tools. I do encourage you, if you manage a blog or a website, do use Google Analytics. It is, for me, one of the key sources of information that we keep track on to see how well we are doing. Next, Charles?
That's all the questions we have for right now.
Okay, excellent. We can go to the next slide, Charles. I'm trying to follow here from...
Oh, wait, there's another question that just came in from David. When I drill down on the organic search, the biggest percentage goes to not provided keyword. Any idea what that is?
That would be a keyword where Google Analytics could not trap what keywords were actually entered. If you want to do a real analysis to what the keywords were that people use, David, then I would suggest that you use Google Webmasters, which gives you a further breakdown of the search qualifiers. And I'll come back to Google Webmasters in just a moment. There's also a tool to link Google Webmasters with Google Analytics to get better overview of the search keywords in Google Analytics itself. But we'll come back to Google Webmaster as one of the tools to monitor and enhance our web traffic in just a moment. Yeah, Charles? Shall we go to the next chapter, Charles, and the next slide?
Yes, we can. We can go.
I'll mute my video again. And keep those questions coming, guys. This is what makes a webinar interesting, is to tailor it to your needs. So we looked at why search traffic is important. We did a quick check on the search traffic retroactively by looking at statistics, proactively in trying to mimic a web visitor, trying to search for content for which we want him or her to end up on our website or our blog. Now we come where the rubber really hits the road, is how does Google rank content? How does Google find content? How does it find the relevant content? How do they relate it over to our website? So next slide, Charles. Well, there's basically 2 principles that Google is using. It is off-page search engine optimization and in-page search engine optimization. And this might be Chinese for most of you. Off-page is anything that happens outside of your own website, where you have less direct control on. In-page is more what happens within your website and within the page. So knowing these two bits of information, let's try to decipher that Chinese and see how we can tweak and how we can influence. When we look at off-page search engine optimization, stuff which is happening mostly outside of your web page, then we have to talk about page ranking. Page ranking, basically off-site search engine optimization in 3 words, is page rank minus penalties. Now, many of you will start frowning and scratching your hair. What the hell does it mean by that? Off-page search engine optimization is page ranking minus penalties. Well, let's look at that in detail. It is not really rocket science. Next slide, Charles. PageRank. What is PageRank? Well, very early on in the 90s, when the web was created, Google was founded as a search engine. That was their main first business. The main challenge they had, though, was how do we qualify what is important on the web and what is not? What is noise and what is relevant content? Which web pages are the most relevant for any of the user's search queries? And in the 90s, we did not have the zillions of web pages as we have now, but still it was already in the millions. So PageRank, what they invented as an algorithm used by Google Search to rank websites in their search engine results pages. So PageRank was named after Larry Page, one of the founders of Google. So PageRank was a way to measure the importance of individual websites and individual pages. Now, PageRank works in principle, and that's how it all started, by counting the number and the quality of links to a web page to determine a rough estimate of how important the website is. So the underlying assumption is the more important a web page is, the more likely it is to receive links from other websites. If I'm FAO.org, lots of people will probably refer in hyperlinks to content which relates to my content, much more than if I would be John Doe blogging on a personal blog. So it works a bit like, for the scientists amongst you, a bit like citations. The most relevant scientific publications are often referred to as the ones which are the most cited by other publications. So the most relevant websites here are the ones which are the most cited or the most linked to by other websites. So in basis and how PageRank started in the 90s, it was just a mere calculation of the amount of other websites linking to your website. So it is a logarithmic scale from 0 to 9, ranking the importance of your site. The more sites that link to your website, the more relevant your site is considered by Google. Thus, the higher the PageRank. Now, let me correct this a little bit. It is not just the amount of sites that link to your website, but also the amount of high-value sites. As you can understand, a site of a much higher PageRank linking to you, for instance, FAO.org, which has a PageRank of 8, if they link to your website, this is seen as Google as much, much more valuable than the link from somebody's personal blog who puts a hyperlink in to your website and which might have a PageRank of 1 or 2 only. So it is an algorithm, a sum of all of the websites that link to you, but not just in mere numbers, but to calculate a certain value to each of those websites. So the more website links that you get from external sites, from high-value sites, the better. Now, this is back in the 90s. It was, in principle, a well-documented and a reasonably simple algorithm to define the value of a web page. But very soon, as Google became prominent in the search engine business, and people started to see the value of search engine traffic, people started to cheat. And they started to cheat with spam sites and created artificial incoming links. They were selling links. So Google gradually, over the years, refined its algorithm up to the point now where it's one of the industry's best kept secrets. So now, in short, we can summarize that your site's PageRank, the value of your site, according to Google, is based on the amount of incoming high-value links, links from high-ranked sites, minus a number of penalties that Google has built in, trying to penalize those people who were trying to break the algorithm by putting in spam sites and spam links, etc., etc. So those penalties are not only based on those cheaters, but also in a way that Google has tweaked their algorithm in a way to avoid general spam on the web and in their efforts to make the web better. So they will penalize you. For instance, if you get links from spam sites, they will penalize you for excessive reciprocal links, because very early on people said, hey, dear Mr. FAO.org webmaster, what if I put a link on or several links from my website to you, and you put in several links from your website to me? So people started to exchange links. It's like kids trading sweets. But this was back in the 90s. Now it became more sophisticated. You're also penalized for basic bad web management. If you have a slow site, you will be penalized, and your value of your PageRank will go down. How many bad and dead links do you have on your website? And we'll come back to that later. So how many hyperlinks do you have on your blog or your website, which basically are dead links, end up to an old URL which doesn't exist anymore? How many coding errors do you have? Is the way that your website has been coded, is it according to the web standards? Is it compatible with mobile browsing? Google penalizes your website if your website is not compatible with mobile browsing. Why? Because more and more people start using mobile browsing. Is it secure? Do you have any links to malware? If you ever get infected, the first thing you have to do is get the infection out, because Google will detect your malware, your infected links in less than a week. Do you also have links to suspected or hidden advertisements? These are all ways that, starting with the PageRank being the amount of websites, high value websites linking to your website, they started to subtract points. And the more bad points, the more penalization you get, the lower your PageRank is. So you might have a good website, a good in terms of referred to by many other websites, but if you have a lot of dead links, if your website is slow, if the coding is really bad, not according to the standards, you might end up with a low PageRank. We'll come back to that later, because of course this is one of the ways to tweak it. But one bit of heads up here, the penalties are often technical elements, something many of us as non-technical communicators do not understand and cannot see. You cannot see that on a website, so from the looks of it, if the search engine optimization was done properly or not, how good the coding was, etc. This is often why we, as communicators, are fooled by web developing companies. It might look good, but underneath the hood, it really might suck. That's why when you ever work on a website revamp, and we'll talk about this, Antonella will talk about this in the next webinar on website revamps, you need to work with content generators as well as technical people. Because your technical people from your organization can look under the hood and see what those web developers are actually doing. If it is standard to the W3 standards, but also how well do they do search engine optimization. And yes, it is possible to make a website which looks good, is fast, and is of zero value for search engines. For instance, for the technical people amongst you, websites, I've come across websites which are completely made in JavaScript, which might be easier to code. It might look much more sexier than a standard website, but for a search engine optimization, the value is zero, because search engine crawlers don't go into scripts. So there is no way for search engines to see what your website is all about, to detect your content. Next slide, Charles. Now, back again to page ranking. I did a survey of about 800 nonprofit blogs a year ago. And this is from PageRank 0 to 9, the logarithmic scale of page ranking, how those 800 nonprofit blogs are distributed in PageRanks. So most of the blogs, as you can see here, are somewhere between a PageRank 3 and 6. Now, this is for blogs. If you would do this for websites, typically websites would have slightly higher figures, where most of the websites would be in the PageRank 5 to 6. In the follow-up email after this webinar, I'll give you a link to a website that calculates your PageRank for your site. So if you're a blog and you have somewhere a PageRank of 3 to 6, you're good. I would say if you're a 5 or a 6, you're really good. If you are a website rather than a blog, probably between a 5 and a 6, that should be your target in terms of page ranking. Next slide, Charles. Now, this is the external X-page search engine optimization. Now, a combination of trying to get as many links as possible from high-quality sites, but also making sure that our website technically works well. Now you have the in-page search engine optimization, which basically is based on two categories of data. And this is almost as important as the external search engine optimization. And often people stop at the off-page search engine optimization, trying to push for the highest possible page rank, but only doing that doesn't work. We might have a website with a lot of high-quality incoming links, which is fast, well-curated, technically working very well, not a lot of dead links, but that doesn't mean that Google will find our content which is relevant to its search. So what is important here is to remember that the Google crawler, the robot, which every day searches zillions of websites around the world, that machine, which scans all of those website contents all of the time, mimics human behavior. It scans a web page as if it were a human and tries to interpret what is important on your page and what is not. It is the important stuff that gets indexed, and this is very often that important stuff what the Google search crawler finds as important stuff that is searchable and where people can find our site, our content, our pages. So what do us as humans stands out when we look at a web page? Well, that's also what Google looks for. First of all, it's a title, of course. Then secondly, it would be emphasized content and added to that meta tags. So emphasized text, this is what we see, what stands out in a page. It's what is bolded, what is in italic, what is in color, what is highlighted. It is also text of your links. But beyond that, Google also looks for meta tags or metadata, which is hidden information specifically meant for search engines and not for web visitors. It is not something that we as a web visitor will see, but what a crawler, the Google search engine, will interpret. So those things, and we'll look at it a little bit more in detail, together with the keywords that the crawler finds, are indexed by Google, and this is what Google finds as the most relevant content. So probably one of the most important pieces of information here would be content title, or the page title, or the blog title, and then from here, even taking this as one of the most important pieces of information, we go into a dilemma. And I'll use this as an example to go a little bit further into details. What is appealing, and listen to me here, what is appealing to a reader, to a web visitor, to a human, might not be appealing to a crawler or to Google. For instance, Too Hot for Chocolate. Next slide, Charles. Too Hot for Chocolate is a typical example of a blog post that I often use when I give workshops on how to write good blog posts. It is a typical title that for a reader, a human reader, might be enticing. I see it as a good title for a blog post, but for a crawler, like a Google crawler, it is not meaningful. So Too Hot for Chocolate might be fun, exciting, short, to the point. The blog post might be light to read and has all of the information I'm looking for, but for a search engine, for a crawler, the title Too Hot for Chocolate, while interesting for a reader, is not really interesting for a crawler. If a crawler sees this, probably it will get confused. Well, it will get confused. Google will not understand easily that this blog post is about cacao production and the influence of climate change on cacao production. And probably you'll find it easier to find in the search results when you search for hot chocolate and dentist rather than climate change or cacao. So if only we could separate what a web visitor sees in the title and what the crawler sees in the title. And this is where search engine meta tags and metadata come in. Next slide, Charles. Most of the self-hosted websites, Drupal, Typo7, self-hosted WordPress.org, allows you to tweak the titles, differentiating what a web visitor sees the visual title and what a search engine sees as a title. So it is often built in the search engine optimization tools to give a specific title and a description to a piece of content is either built in the content management system, or you can add it as a plugin. In WordPress, it's added as a plugin. So with the search engine tools, as you can see here on this screen, you can add a title and a description, but it's a meta tag and a meta description. It is not something that a typical human visitor visually sees on the web page, but it more accurately describes your site and your page content with more significant keywords, specifically geared for the search engines. So with search engine optimization tools, we can differentiate what is intriguing for a reader as a title, what is intriguing for a web visitor, such as Too Hot for Chocolate, which is the actual blog title, and what the web crawlers need as information. So a typical title that might be more interesting than Too Hot for Chocolate for a search engine would be, for instance, new research shows impact of climate change on cacao production in Colombia. It has all of the keywords that we really need and what the blog post is about. It is about research. It's about the impact of climate change. It's on cacao production, and it's in Colombia. Now, if we would use that, of course, as a title for our blog posts for the web visitor, new research impacts. So new research shows the impact of climate change on cacao production in Colombia. Oh, this is really boring. So that's why with good search engine optimization, we can differentiate making it exciting for visitors, for readers, and making it significant for the crawlers. And with that meta information, the search engine metadata of the title and the description, what is only visible for the search engine, these are what we call meta tags. So in principle, every page on your website should have a title and a description meta tag relevant for the search engine, or at least those pages where the title of your blog post or the title of your page might seem ambiguous for the search engine, such as Too Hot for Chocolate. So the art here is when you try to see how a search engine sees your title is to read the blog, this time not with the eyes of a web visitor, but with the eyes of a search engine. If it is confusing, then you should add a separate search engine meta tag. Note, however, that in some web publishing platforms, which are not self-hosted, such as WordPress.com or Tumblr or Blogger, they do not allow you to tweak these meta tags. So here you're stuck with really the web visitor title. But most of the content management systems that we all use allow you to do that. So in here, one of the arts of good in-page search engine optimization would be to look at those pages with those titles which are not significant for a crawler and tweak those titles with meta tags, giving it a web crawler title and a web crawler description. Next slide, Charles. And you can not only do this for pages, but you can also do this for images. This is a snapshot, a screenshot from the meta tags that we can enter on pictures. So you can understand if you upload a picture to your site with the name DSC12307.jpg, without a caption or description, there is no way that Google can understand what this picture is all about. And here we lose quite a bit of traffic because picture search traffic, image search traffic becomes more and more important as a source of traffic. And somewhere I think it's because more and more content is being generated worldwide on the web. So more and more people look for more and more illustrations they can use. So what we need to do is what most web platforms allow us to do is when we add a picture, upload a picture, we also add an alternative text and a description for this picture, which might be short. I always use the same text for the description and the alternative text. So as metadata, I can give a search engine a friendly description for what the picture stands for. For instance, instead of using DSC12307.jpg as the title of the picture, I can use something like rural farmer in Zata district, Ghana, with Frisian dairy cattle, full with keywords that we want people to find our image on. It's about rural farmers. It's Zata district. It's about Ghana. It's about Frisian and it's about dairy cattle. So the meta description and alternative text enter that when you upload a picture onto your website. So apart from the blog title, as we covered, also the picture metadata helps Google discover what the web page or what the images are all about. Just a short summary, blog title, most important. Then anything on your page which is emphasized, which is put in bold or italic or is put in color, or the text that you use to link to other content, the text that you use for hyperlinking. This is what a visitor sees as the most important content that stands out. That's also what the web crawler sees. Now, if you need to delink your web visitor title with what the crawler should see, then we use metadata. We use a crawler title and only for crawlers, and we use a description only for crawlers. So all of that is in-page search engine optimization. So combine the two. And again, what is really important to understand is not about trying to push only, about trying to push our website with as many possible external links, pushing our PageRank higher up. I have seen examples where the site is technically well constructed, a site which had a PageRank of 8, but where the in-page search engine optimization was not done well. So Google had a real hard time to find what each of the pages were all about. It had a hard time trying to find the relevant keywords. It had a hard time to index your traffic, and their traffic was very low, even though they had a PageRank of 8. So what they had to do is tweak the in-page search engine optimization. Haha, hopefully now the Chinese is a little bit debunked. Next slide, Charles, and we go into a next Q&A session.
Okay, so we only have a couple questions right now, so if anybody wants to write some more in, I'm watching. The first one we have is from Sammy. He says, are we focusing on Google because it is the most used search engine? Does everything also apply to Bing and or Yahoo?
Yeah, a very good question. The Google traffic is by far the most used search engine. We can see this if we look at the sources of the search traffic on any of the websites that somewhere I've come across or I monitor. The Google traffic is by far the highest traffic. So that's why I mostly work on optimizing the website for Google. It's true you also have Bing. I'm not too sure. I don't think you really have the Yahoo search engine anymore, but you have Ask Me and you have specialized search engines. I always work from the principle, if I can optimize my website for Google, nothing that I do is very specific for Google, but I know how Google works, which is somewhere also the algorithm that many of the other search engines work. So if I optimize my website and my blog for Google, I also automatically have optimized it for other search engines. But keep in mind the majority, if not almost all of your search traffic will come from Google. Next, Charles.
Okay, so how do we technically diversify our titles to reach both engines and human readers?
Yeah, that you do with the example that I gave with a search engine optimization tool, which for many of the content management systems that we work on is built in, which allows us to give a title visible to the web visitor, to somebody who looks at our web page, and give a different title and a short description for the crawlers. So it is done via a search and an SEO plugin or an SEO tool built in your content management system. That's how you de-link the two. This is not something you can do on WordPress.com.
Amy asks, do web crawlers take image titles, caption, and description into account? Any other information?
Yeah, they use, it's a title and the alternative text. These are two fields you can normally enter when you upload a picture or incorporate a picture on your pages, but also the caption. And I didn't talk about caption. So if a caption is linked to your image, Google will also relate that image to the text in the caption. However, the caption is again something which is visible for the user. So I'm not telling you to add captions to all of your text. Very often I find captions actually pretty disturbing. But if you add captions in for a picture visible for the user, make sure that also the crawler sees it. However, it is the title and the description which is most relevant for images. Yes, Charles?
All right. Do we have any
Any
more questions? Anybody?
All right. We go to the next chapter. So
Daisy,
please keep...
oh, sorry,
Yes?
Peter. Daisy says, is it enough to just name the photo? Not sure
Yeah.
which means.
So Daisy, you're working with WordPress, for instance. It is good enough to name the picture, but with something which is descriptive. As my example, it was what was it? Farmer in Chat district in northern Ghana with his Frisian dairy cattle. So I would use a title and the alternative text, the alt text, as keywords. Again, it is not something that the user sees by default. It is only something that the web crawler sees, and that is good enough. If you only upload a picture and the picture's title is the title of the file that you upload, dsc12307.jpg, Google will never ever be able to understand what this picture is about.
All right. And Jerry says, does the raw URL also work for web crawlers? Can you tweak it for search engines so it's not just a replication of the title?
It is the raw URL which is used and displayed. And here we go a little bit what I wouldn't call the basic search engine optimization anymore, but more the advanced one. If you're in advanced search engine optimization, I would encourage you to use a canonical URL. This is a URL which is not, for instance, worldagroforestry.org / page equals 123, etc., which are very often the default URLs when we work with content management systems. We would actually give it a URL which has in the URL itself, which has the keywords what this web page or blog page is all about. So it is not possible to, when Google displays a URL, to tweak that and display it differently. But what you need to do is when you publish on your website, on your blog, before you publish, you tweak the URL so it becomes canonical. So it is actually readable text rather than figures. It is somewhat important and significant for search engine optimization, but it's not really basic search engine optimization. So use canonical URLs. What Google displays as URL is the physical one on your page, yes.
All right. That's it for now. That's all we have.
Okay, very good. Next slide, Charles. So we looked at why is search traffic important, the traffic volume and the quantity, and the quality, sorry. How can we check for search traffic retroactively through statistics and proactively mimicking a typical user, a typical searcher? We looked at how Google ranks content by X-page and in-page, so off-page and in-page search engine optimization. Now, in this chapter, I want to look a little bit at how to get better search results. Understanding now how Google ranks my web page and my individual content, how it discovers it, how it tries to find the most relevant content. How can we tweak? How can we get better results from the search engine? Next slide, Charles. And I'll start with the first tip, which is not something that people typically relate to search engine optimization. The very first thing that I would do, and I always do when we start launching a new website, is to, yes, Charles, the first line, is to submit and monitor our site to Google Webmaster. And yes, Bing has something similar. Google Webmaster, next slide, Charles, is a free tool, which I found, being a webmaster, extremely useful. It allows you to monitor Google's activity on your site. So what is being crawled? How frequent is it being crawled? What typical pages are being searched? It also shows which website is linking to what content. So which external website is linking to what content on your site. It lists the typical search keywords that people use and discover your site. So you can understand the keywords that people type for new users discovering your site. But it also analyzes the quality of your site, which is somewhere related to search engine optimization and somewhere related to good website management, good web mastering. So Google Webmasters tool analyzes the average speed of your site. It analyzes crawling errors. It analyzes linking errors. Like here on this example on this screen, you can see that on that particular website, we have 22 links in the whole website, which is not bad. 22 links which are dead, that Google could not find the URL that I hyperlink to. Typically, this is old content referring to content on external websites which doesn't exist anymore. They took it down. And as you know, many of these quality qualifiers for a good website are also related to the penalties that Google gives to your website, bringing your page rank down. So with all of those qualifiers, we're not only looking at the good quality site, but also reducing the penalties, increasing our web traffic. If you haven't looked at Google Webmasters yet, and that you can use for almost any content management system, I strongly encourage you that. There are some really, really technical and in-depth things in there, but it gives a good overview also in general of how people discover your content. It is a tool to discover dead links. It is a tool to discover actually what search visitors are doing on your site. Next slide, Charles. And of course, what is interesting, remember to PageRank. PageRank was related to how many websites are linking to my website. So it gives you an overview of the total links from external websites. So in here, you see this particular website that we're looking at has a total of 140,000. And this is a PageRank 4 website, by the way. Has a total of 152,000 incoming links. And you see which websites are linking the most to our website. So that helps you a little bit of tracking who is hyperlinking from their website to yours. Somewhere, if you have sleepless nights, I go into the details and actually look what people wrote about my website. You know, what did they write around the hyperlinks that they link to my website, which is always an interesting thing to do in the sleepless nights. Next slide, Charles. So it's not only about submitting it to Google Webmaster and monitoring it. There are, of course, loads of other ways in getting better search results. Next click, Charles. I want to stress this again, and almost in any webinar or workshop that I give is very often we concentrate on technical tools to tweak, but it really all starts with good content. Content is king. This is probably still the main qualifier for a good website beyond all of the search engine optimization tips and tricks that I covered in this webinar. We can somewhere technically through good search engine optimization lure people via the search onto our site, but if our content is average, it's not really worth it. Good content will also spread much easier, will be linked more. So it all starts, and this is an encouragement again for you people who are not webmasters, not technically inclined. It starts with you, the people who actually write content. It starts with good content. Next click, Charles. But of course, you also need to help with your basic site SEO. It is not all about writing good content. So basic good site SEO, make sure that your site has a proper title and a proper description for Google, which is done with search engine optimization tools. Make sure your code is clean and your site is fast. And then when you go into more work, try to get as many mentions on external websites as possible, as many incoming links from third-party websites, and as many as possible high-quality links. So if I would start a blog tomorrow, the first thing I would do after the blog is finished and I have some content in there, I would submit it to the Google Webmasters, and I would start doing some basic search engine optimization and trying to get people from external high-value websites such as CGI.org, UNICEF.org, UN.org, CGI.org, etc., to link to me. That will pop up my PageRank and pop up my my volume. Now, in here, when we talk about good basic site SEO and good basic content and page search engine optimization, where we try to have people link to our website, something which is really, really important when you manage a website and a blog for an organization. That is, in principle, you should never change your site URL, nor the URL of your individual content pages. So let me repeat that. You should never change your site URL, nor the URL of your content pages. Why? Well, simply, if we encourage, and also it grows organically, if your website has been on the market for 5 years or for 10 years, you will be linked by tens of thousands of other sites. Now, if you revamp your website and you change either your basic URL, and I will give you the example of, we went from egfar.org to gfar.net last year. I will tell you what the consequence was. Now, a part in the revamping, even if you leave the main URL, for instance, GFAR.org or worldagroforestry.org, if you keep that, very often when people change content management system or they revamp the website, they break the URLs. And the new pages, the new blog pages or the new web pages would have a different URL. This means that with one click where you activate your new website, you basically break all of the hyperlinks coming into your website. So this means that anybody using your old URLs from a third-party website and clicks on that will end up on a dead link. Also internally in your site, where you often refer to other pages within your site, and that's what you should do. That's a good way to tease people to read other content. All of those URLs would be dead. So in principle, you should never, ever, when you revamp your website, when you tweak your website, change either your main site URL or your content URLs. You will lose massively in search traffic, as basically Google hates dead links, and in a week, they will discover that most of the people linking to your website are linking to dead links. So your page rank will go down, your site will be penalized. We'll also tackle this and the art of when you revamp your website, not the art of not breaking URLs and preserving your old URLs. We will cover this in the art of website revamps, which is the next webinar. And we'll have one of our champions of website revamping, Antonella Pastore, here, and she will explain how you can technically preserve the validity of your page URLs. A practical example. Last year, we were running still up to July. The GFAR website was called egfar.org. Now, between all 50 of you listening and me, we needed to change the URL simply because where the URL is managed, the domain management system was not under our control, and those who managed it refused to change to our new physical site. So we had no other way than to re-register a new domain name and start from afresh. So with one click, we went from egfar.org to gfar.net last year, about 13 months ago. Now, the release of the new website, while it was done 13 months ago, still to date, we have not recovered. Still to date, our page rank is still 0, while we had, I think, a page rank of 5 13 months ago on the old domain. And our search traffic today, 13 months after the revamping and changing all of our URLs, is still a fraction of what it used to be. It basically takes years to build up that search engine traffic. So Next slide. No, sorry, Charles. Sorry, you're already there. So make sure you also do your basic content and page search engine optimization. So in there, when you put titles and descriptions to pages, make sure you do it consciously. Do not spam the description and the title with keywords, because Google will detect when you try to artificially insert a lot of keywords into your title and description. So do your basic content and page search engine optimization, distinguishing for those pages who have titles which are totally insignificant and irrelevant for search engines. Give it a good search engine optimization title and description. And then, as we covered, metadata for images. Make sure you upload it with a good title and alt text for your images. In all of it, Google is getting quite clever. And while in the early days, it was pretty easy to cheat and to put artificial links to a website and spam our website with hidden keywords that the web visitor does not see, but the crawler sees. These days, now the Google crawler, as well as the Bing crawler, has become very sophisticated. So it becomes really, really difficult to cheat. So in there, I would encourage you, with the good content, make sure you have a good conscience on search engine optimization. Next slide, Charles. I think we're going back again into a Q&A session. Go ahead, Charles. Do you have anything for me?
I have one question from Dax, which you kind of touched on, I believe. He says, is it advisable to buy a URL if your blog is on WordPress? Would it be easier to find in search engines if you remove WordPress, you know, the reference to being a WordPress URL?
The way that there's two answers to that. There's two parts to that question. So yes, if you're running on WordPress.com, you can buy, but actually you don't buy a domain, you hire it from a domain supplier such as GoDaddy.com, for instance. So you can rent a domain name, daxagriculture.org, for instance, and you can link that to your WordPress.com. To be able to do that, I think you need to pay WordPress.com. I think it is $99 per year for them to make the link. So yes, even if you don't host your blog or your website yourself, you can still use your own domain. It's the same on Blogger. Instead of having a website, something daxagriculture.blogspot.com, you can also rent a domain and link. It's the same in Tumblr also. So yes, in WordPress.com, you can rent a domain and have, while you're physically run on WordPress.com, you can actually have a customized domain. The example here pardon, is blog.gfar.net. So this is on our domain, but actually physically, this blog is running on WordPress.com. So you can put that mapping in there, and it costs about, I think it was $99 per year. The second question from Dax is, would it make it easier for Google to discover your content? I wouldn't say to discover your content, but somewhere it is rumored that Google values blogs which are running on, for instance, blogspot.com or under the URL wordpress.com lower than other content. Why is this? Well, it's pretty easy to explain. I mean, if you really have a high value site, you most probably, as an organization, for instance, and you run this blog professionally, most probably the first thing you will do is put this blog and website under your own domain name and not use the default blogspot.com or wordpress.com. So it's somewhere understandable that Google would value those higher. How much that value is, I do not know. But I would say, yes, Google would value your own domain higher than a default domain like WordPress.com or blogspot.com. Do also know when you change that, so if you go from WordPress.com or blogspot.com, actually they will do the URL translation. So you will not be faced with the hurdle that we covered before. This is one. Also remember that it takes a long time for Google to adapt its page ranking. and it's keywords. So it's not because from one day you go from daxagriculture.wordpress.com to daxagriculture.org. It is not from the same day or the next day that actually your Pagerank will shoot up and Google will think that your site is more relevant than others. It is very gradually. Typically, it's every 6 months or a year that somewhere Google does an update on the page ranking. But also, it takes a long time for Google to adapt and find the changes. And to adapt the value of your site. So it is something which is of a long breath. Yes, Charles?
Amy asks, or she comments, I don't quite understand what is meant with cheating in terms of search engine optimization. Do you mean that you have too many keywords, including the internal links?
Yeah. The search engine optimization is a multi-million-dollar business. So there are companies that do nothing else, taking your website and optimizing it in a way that your results are pushed high up on the search engine results pages, something they call SERP, S-E-R-P, search engine results pages. Now, originally, back in the 90s, when Google had a very simple algorithm, but it was just a question of how many sites link to you, what is the value of those sites, those companies would cheat by running hundreds, if not thousands, of websites, which are nothing else but spam websites with dummy content that is scraped off somewhere from the web, and where, for a fee, they would put in a link from that website to yours. So this means that in a week's time, you would go from 10 sites that link to your website to probably 10,000 or 100,000, depending on how much you pay those companies. This was the very early 90s and early 2000s way of cheating. You buy links, just like nowadays you can buy Twitter followers, you can buy Facebook likes, you can buy Instagram followers. You could buy, and you can still do, but it's far, far less effective, buy external links. It's far less effective, and it's even counter-effective because Google has ways to detect those spam sites. They can detect whether a site is filled with dummy content. Very simply, if they find the content somewhere else, this means it's duplicated content. So I would be really, really, really careful with that. Another way to cheat was people who run a website, and this is cheating down in the years. When people run a real website, a real professional website, they would put in hidden links that the users, the web visitors don't see, but the crawlers see. So they would create loads of content, good content, but they would hide external links and they would sell those external links. So I would actually sell my real estate on my blog to third parties. And you might think this is a rocket science or science fiction, or I'm inventing things. I tell you, there was, I think it was a year and a half ago, when I did an analysis for one of the CGR research centers, that I actually found out that somewhere in the history of years, somebody had injected hidden links in their site. Maybe there was somebody from a technical team who sold links. I do not know. So this was a way to cheat. Now, another way to cheat would be, as Amy said, yes, artificially putting in the SEO title or the SEO description a lot of keywords and a lot of repetition or variations of the same keyword. So it would have climate change, climate change adaptation, climate smart agriculture, all in the title. Google doesn't like that, those repetitions. So these are ways to artificially cheat. Yeah, injecting keywords.
All right. That's all we have for right now.
Very good. We're going into the, we're right on time, into the last chapter of the webinar. I'm switching off my video again, Charles. Voila. Yes, Charles. Click, click, click. We went why it is important, how do we check for traffic, how does Google discover content, next click. How can we tweak our stuff to get better search results? And the next click, fifth and last chapter, is for me the art of web mastering. It's like the Zen art of web mastering. Next slide, Charles. To me, the art of webmastering is to turn those accidental visitors we get from search engines typically into returning visitors. Here is something you really need to pay attention to, because this is, I would say, something what distinguishes online media chickens from online media eagles. Daisy is going to say, oh, there he goes again with his chickens and his eagles. We can I saw you frowning. Now we can tweak all of the with all of the search engine optimizations and spend a lot of time in tweaking our site so our site becomes really well searchable. So when we invent any type of keyword which is somewhere even remotely related to our site and through which we want people to find our content. When we tweak our content pages and give it what Peter says, SEO, meta tag, titles, and we give all of the images a title and a description, we can do all of that and push our site really high up into the search results page. We will see an increase in search traffic. This means we will see traffic on our sites. Now, you need to understand that many people that arrive from a search engine and click on the link from a search result that they found on the search engine pages, many of them are accidental visitors. Many of them are people who are not, who do not know our site or are not regular visitors to our site. And again, with Google Analytics, I can prove you that this is true, that most of the search traffic, incoming search traffic, are visitors who have not come on our page before, or certainly are not returning visitors. So here you are, you have Alibaba's cave with all of the gold and glitter of search engine optimization. You followed all of Peter's tips of getting a lot of search traffic. Now you need to capitalize on that. And you cannot leave it to the fact that those accidental visitors only come to your website one time. The really art of webmastering, the Zen art of webmastering for me is the art of turning those accidental visitors into returning visitors. So here you need to put yourself a little bit into the shoes of a person who for the first time in his or her life has discovered blog.worldagroforestry.org. So how can we turn, thank you, Charles, you're following very well. So how can we turn those incidental visitors into somebody who will look at this website, scan through more content, and say, this is something I need to remember. So the first thing is when we come in as a visitor who has never found your website before, the first thing is anchors. And I'll talk a little bit. Let me list them first. We click through Charles. The anchors are key elements to tell a user or help the user explaining what this website is all about and what we as an organizations are all about. I'll give you an example in a moment. The second one is hooks. See as an accidental visitor coming to our website for the first time, discovering our website for the first time through a search page. We see them as a fish, and we need to be able to hook that fish and convert that accidental visitor into a subscribed visitor. And I'll give you an explanation what I mean by hooks. The third one is, of course, good navigation. I would not say only good navigation, but also make sure that your website has a good look and feel and has good content. But purely technically, a good navigation. If people cannot find content on your website, once they are on your website, you will lose them. And then the fourth one is teaser content. When people come onto a page, one particular page, and remember, most of the people that do searches don't end up on your homepage, but actually end up on one particular blog post or one particular page. So keep that in mind when you design your web revamp. Most of the people spend 90% of their time of web revamping on the layout of the homepage. Actually, it's not the homepage which is most relevant, because probably 95% of your traffic does not go to your homepage, but to a particular blog post or a particular page on your website. So when somebody comes through a search engine to a page or a blog post, make sure that we present him or her, that incidental visitor, with enough teaser content. Now, teaser content might be we have on the sideline, we have related content to this post, or we put internal links in the blog post that people can continue to click and continue to delve into other content. Or at the end of the blog post, we put a summary of where people can find more content. Let's go through this one by one. First of all, it was, next slide, thank you, Charles. Next slide, the first one is anchors. What do I mean by an anchor? Well, where does the terminology come from? See an incidental visitor coming onto your website, he or she does not know what your website is all about. They come onto a page for content that they have searched for. Now, if they have never seen your website or your blog before, they will need to know what your website is about and what your organization is all about. So they will need to find somewhere an easy to find about us. The anchor terminology comes from the website, the newly arrived website visitors, almost like ships going around in a wild sea. They need to find an anchor to understand what this website and this organization managing this website is all about. So the first way to convert a newly or a first-time visitor into returning visitors is make them feel at home, make them feel comfortable. They need to understand what your blog, your website, and your organization is all about. So make in your navigation, make it very clear, make a very clear part which is about us, and don't overwhelm them with a lot of information. Make the first page, very short and to the point about you as an organization and what this website or blog is all about. The next one, Charles, would be the hooks. This is where we hook the fish. If we can bring a visitor in, and if we can have this visitor subscribe to any of our outlets, then we have converted this single-time visitor into a returning visitor. And the hooks might be a range of items. If we have a newly visiting a first-time visitor, and we get him or her to subscribe to our Facebook page, to our Twitter feed, to our LinkedIn or Google Plus, to our YouTube channel, but even more so, if we get them to subscribe to our RSS feeds, and we covered RSS feeds in one of the past webinars, or we can convince them to subscribe to our newsletter, then we have converted that first-time occasional visitor into returning visitor. When they like our page, when they subscribe to our Twitter feed or LinkedIn, when they subscribe to our RSS, to our email newsletter, then we have a returning visitor. And that really, the hooks is an art by itself, not to overdo it, but this is the range of hooks that you have. Get them to subscribe to either some of your social media outlets or to your Insight RSS feeds or newsletters. Next slide, Charles. We covered good navigation, and this is good navigation or just in general good layout. Even if you have good content, but if people get lost despite your anchors, they get lost within your content, they get lost and they don't know how to find other content or to find other parts of your website, then this is really a negative value, and it's where we very often lose our visitors, be it returning visitors or newly visitors. Next one, Charles. Next to the hooks and the anchor, most important is teaser content. All too often, we present a blog post, and it's very difficult for a first-time visitor or returning visitor to find any related content. That's why I would encourage you, and there's plenty of tools in any of the content management systems that allow you to do that. In the site column, for instance, put something like what you see here on the screen, related content, with a list of blog posts which have the same type of content as the one that the person has just read. Or at the bottom of your post, of your blog post or your page, put, and you can put this manually, put a number of links. Here we can read more about this particular research. Download all of the full scientific data set of this research. Download the full scientific article. View pictures from this research. more from the same author, etc., etc. So this is teaser content. People have landed on one blog post or a page, and we tease them and also reading other content. If you have good content, the more content people discover. So the lower your bounce rate, the more they will appreciate your site and the more they will be eager in returning to your site. So these are probably the four ways of converting the accidental first-time visitor into returning visitor. The anchors, make them feel at home, know what this website or organization is all about, hooking them onto our social media channels, RSS feeds, our newsletter, a good navigation, and teaser content. Aha. So this is how we convert occasional search visitors and how we capitalize on all of the efforts that we've done on a good search engine optimization in converting these people into returning visitors. Next slide, Charles. And I think we can actually stop the presentation. And I'm going video on. All right, Charles, tell me, do you have any questions for me? Charles, I think you're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
It was the mute button, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay, Charles, go
Too many
ahead.
buttons. Amy Green asks, a web designer told me that menu navigation is losing importance due to increasing mobile use, and that navigation through content is increasingly important. Can you comment on your experience?
Yeah, yes, it's true. Mobile browsing through mobile devices is exploding. Do know that very often also people put tablet browsing as mobile browsing, although very often the layout is very similar. So the in-content navigation becomes more and more important. This is something we did not have before the explosion of the mobile market. So 5 years ago, for instance, it would already be rare that a website also has a mobile version, but nobody would pay attention with in-content navigation. So I would say do both. Make sure that whatever you do on mobile, people have a way of still navigating. While it is much easier to do this in a good way when you have a full screen, on a laptop or a desktop or on a full-size tablet, it is much more difficult to do it in a mobile. I would still keep the navigation in a mobile though. Yes. It's also very interesting to see the differences in typical traffic. Very often mobile users would have a much higher bounce rate. So very often mobile users would come to one particular page that they have found typically on social media and read that, but would not browse through other content. So it is a much more difficult public to convert from a single time, first time visitor into returning visitor. So once again, Amy is right there. In content navigation for mobile devices is very, very important.
I don't see any more questions at the moment.
Okay, we had some, I think, Charles, you told me some tips that some people gave to others.
Yeah, a certain, and I'm going to massacre the pronunciation, I'm sure, Fiskiavel, who may be dropping out because he says the blue jeans sucked all his battery. But he's been sending some useful links. How to check up on your SEO performance of your website. He just sent one, Moz.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I can do, Charles, is go through these tips and see if I can incorporate some or maybe find some equally interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, they look good. I think you should, note down these links that he's been sending.
Yeah, I think you can. Yeah. I think we're saving the chat also when we come out of the webinar, Charles. Yeah, let me see if there is an easy way for me to select all. Did you see a common save feature in the BlueJeans tools?
I'm looking.
In case we would lose the comments, we just write down the name. It's Javel. All right.
Well, I've written down all the questions, so I'll now copy down these links.
Okay, cool. So Ogidan is asking if we can save the chats attached to the webinar. Fishkevella has just emailed them to me. Excellent, excellent.
Oh,
Thank you very
great.
much. And sorry that
Thank you.
BlueJeans is exhausting your battery. It's the same here. I can feel my laptop getting warmer. Excellent. Thanks, Fishkevel. More. We also had guest 9 who has a link to a great training. Let me see. Last chance for anybody. If anybody has any follow-up questions. What I will also send in the wrap-up email is, first of all, a link to the saved webinar, a link to a webpage where you can see your own PageRank, where your PageRank is calculated for you. But it's not calculated for you. Is they check on Google what your PageRank is. A link to the Google Webmaster and the Bing Webmaster tools. I will also send a link to a guy who works for Google and who is the head of their anti-spam search engine optimization team called Matt Cutts. He has a blog, and this would probably be more for the technical people, where he explains the ins and outs of the Google side of search engine optimization and how they are optimizing their algorithm, trying to avoid misuse and spamming, and to present you with more relevant links to the keywords that you type in. This is what you will get from me. And then I'll go through Fishkevel's remarks, and I can add them also in the email. That's it. I don't see any new questions coming in. Charles, we're right on time. We said an hour and a half to 2 hours. That's it from me. Thank you very much. I think in the peak we had 60 simultaneous participants, which is really cool. Thanks very much for making it interactive with all of these questions. Charles, thank you very much for helping out. Your clicks and your swaps through the PowerPoint presentation were right on time. Can I hire you?
I think I'm already hired.
You already got hired. Very good. Thank you very much, everybody. Remember, the next webinar is on, it's slightly more technical, but we also cover content items, is on website revamps. And we have the vamp of revamps. We have Antonella Pastori with us, who is a queen of website revamps. I had the honor of working with Antonella on several occasions. If you want to know anything about revamp, she, to me, is the go-to person. So she will cover the process of website revamps, the pitfalls, and the opportunities during a revamp process, how to organize your revamp team, etc., etc., etc. So that's within 14 days. If you have not subscribed yet, hurry, because we're already over 70 subscribers for that webinar, and they cannot go higher than 100. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you again, Charles, and I wish you a good afternoon and a good morning.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks for the feedback. Cheers.